Here's one person's experience being autistic.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Woodruff Tait. I am 52 years old. I was diagnosed officially with ASD level 1, which is known as high functioning autism. I prefer autism with low support needs when I was 49, but I probably self diagnosed myself 20 years before that. When I was in my 20s, I read a book about what was then referred to as Asperger's disease, and I brought it to my mother, who I now believe was probably level 2, medium support need autistic. And she said, "Oh, you can't be autistic. You can't have Asperger's because I experience all these same things and I'm not autistic." Well, I believe now that she was, but this sort of sat in the back of my head for a while. And then when I was in my late 40s, my older child went through the process of diagnosis. And we were having a meeting where the psychologist was asking questions about my child. And I thought, gosh, I can answer all these questions myself. So I asked the child psychologist who was diagnosing my older child to recommend somebody who would do an adult diagnosis. It was actually pretty easy for me to get a diagnosis, but I've found that it's been harder for other people later. This was early during the pandemic. We did it over Zoom. Of course, I didn't have a very long wait list. I think in just the last few years, there's really been an explosion in diagnoses, people trying to access diagnoses. And so the same person now has like a 5-year wait list. But anyway, one of the hardest parts for people who want to be officially diagnosed is finding someone and getting on a waiting list for someone who would diagnose adult autistics. There aren't that many people still that will do that. Once I talked to the psychologist, the actual process was not that difficult. She had me fill out several assessments. We had 2 interviews where she talked through various things. And then we had a third meeting. I think when we had the meetings, the first 2, she was working through assessments on her end, answering questions. And then the third meeting, she presented to me what she had written up. And she said, sort of, does this accurately represent our discussions? Do you want to make sure I understood what was going on? And we also talked a little bit about putting specific things into what she was writing about accommodations that I might want to ask for, particularly accommodations in medical settings. So she wrote those down as suggestions. So, for instance, to go to my doctor for certain things that I find difficult in a medical setting. So what characteristics of mine that people notice? Well, I stare at the ceiling a lot. I'm doing it right now. Over the years, I've become a pretty good masker in terms of masking, autistic masking, which is a whole other subject. So I think I have a lot of characteristics of being autistic that people just don't notice. People know that I have a PhD and I read a lot of books. So I think, oh, Jennifer's just weird because she's, an intellectual. That's true, but it's also true that people sometimes notice that I have special interests, that I get really invested in things. But I think that a lot of times people don't really notice unless I tell them, because I masked very heavily. So I was in my late 40s and got diagnosed. And so a lot of times in public, I'm thinking, like even right now, sitting in my office, I'm thinking about the temperature, how my clothes feel, the way my voice is coming out of my mouth, by making eye contact, the words I'm using. And the sensory input from the setting around me is utterly overwhelming at every moment. A lot of people aren't aware that that's going on unless I tell them. People are like, wait, aren't you just listening to what I'm saying? And I'm like, well, there's a TV on in the corner. And they say, yeah, just block it out. And no, I can't do that. I think a lot of people's concept of autism is still Rain Man. And they don't think that autistic people are women. And there's still actually not a lot of research on what autism looks like in women. And then people say, you hold down a job, you have degrees, you're married, you have children. Autistic people can't do those things. It can be challenging to do those things, but I am autistic and I do those things. So a lot of times people don't think I'm autistic because I'm working really, really hard for them not to think that. I've gotten much better after getting my official diagnosis. It's just saying, look, I'm autistic, and that means I need these accommodations, and I'm going to be this way as we relate to each other. One of the strengths, I think, of my autism, maybe the best way to put it, is pattern recognition. Autistic people in general are really good at pattern recognition. And so and walk into a situation, I get vibes from the situation because I'm subconsciously recognizing patterns. And I'll be like, yeah, you shouldn't trust this person. And then other people say, that person's perfectly fine. And then later, if they find out we shouldn't have trusted that person. So I pick up on that sort of thing a lot in a situation. I'm almost sort of prophetically. My mother used to do this. She knew when people were going to write her back when we all wrote letters and sent them in the mail. She'd say, "Oh, I'm going to get a letter from so and so today or tomorrow," and then she would. And at the time, I thought she was doing magic, but I think it was pattern recognition in terms of she was subconsciously recognizing about how often that person would write to her. So I think that's one of the biggest strengths. Also, I think perseverance. With an autistic person, a lot of times, if there's something you want to do, especially something you have a special interest in, you'll hang on for dear life. And in my case, one of my special interests was getting a PhD, and doctoral programs are really hard. So the autism sort of gave me the strength to persevere that. Challenges, some of the challenges to having autism for me are that the world is not built for people with sensory sensitivity. And so, for example, every time I go to a doctor's office, at least my doctor's, there's a TV in the corner because I guess neurotypical people are bored, want to watch something while waiting for the doctor. And I find this utterly terrible, especially if it's turned to soap operas. The best case scenario is it's turned to that health channel where there's somebody on there talking about how to get your blood pressure checked. But a lot of times it's doing this soaps or, some kind of, once I took my kids to the doctor and it was doing some kind of, supernatural show. And I've got just sort of no control over the way that batters in on my senses and on my emotions. I'm like, I'm just at the allergist. I didn't sign up to have nightmares because you're showing supernatural. So one of the most challenging things to being autistic at my age is the constant amount of energy that I spend on sensory things that may or may not even be noticed by other people, but that are assaulting me in every situation. Faith. So my faith has been sustaining, but also something that there's been some issues around because I grew up in a tradition where it was expected that you would have a really emotional approach to faith, and I didn't, and so I constantly felt like that was something wrong with my spiritual growth, and now I understand that I'm autistic. I'm not going to have the expected emotions at the expected times. If I have emotions, I'm not going to be able to label them. I'm not going to be able to know exactly what they are. I'm not going to respond to things in the way that was expected to respond to. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe in the creeds and that I don't believe in the scriptures and that I don't believe that, that Jesus is real and that I can have a relationship with him. It just means that I don't really have that relationship emotionally. But one of the things that has been more sustaining is as I discovered more liturgical aspects of faith. A lot of autistic people who are religious love liturgical traditions because the same thing happens every week. And so it's very predictable. I'm Episcopalian. I know that there will be the Book of Common Prayer, that we will say these prayers, that I will hear three scriptures, readings in a psalm, that there will be communion. We do communion in a very predefined way. So discovering the fact that there was a tradition out there that would, sort of allow me to come into it with my Christian beliefs, but not expect me to have certain emotions as long as I followed the procedures. That gets a lot of times people like, oh, no, that's not real faith. Well, for an autistic person, I think that kind of faith is a godsend, the kind of faith that says, you know what, you're not saved through following the procedures, you're saved by Jesus, but you can experience faith through following predefined procedures, and that is okay, and people will not, get upset at you for it or say that you aren't really a Christian because you're not having the right kind of emotions. So my relationship to faith as an autistic person is complicated in all those ways.
I am Theresa Werba. I am the author of the newly released Finally Autistic, Finding My Autism Diagnosis, what did I say, as a middle-aged female. And I am currently 62 years old. I was diagnosed at the age of 53. The process of getting diagnosed was frustrating, I would say, for me, because since my early 20s, I had the quote, bipolar diagnosis. And at one point it was refined to be mixed states bipolar, which meant that I was supposedly manic, depressed, and anxious at the same time. So when I was presented with the possibility that actually my problem was autism, or my condition was autism, I went to a particular uh, place to get evaluated, and they said, well, you're not being treated for your bipolar, so we can't evaluate you until you get your bipolar treated, which was kind of like, why didn't they at least consider the fact that maybe it wasn't bipolar at all? So my second time, a few years later, I went to a different research facility. And this is an answer to the second part of the question. It was extremely valuable and rewarding for me because I felt truly, for the first time, really, truly understood and vindicated. I felt like she was able to see through all that other stuff and get to the heart of my struggles and my challenges and my life story. And I believe that she definitely gave me an accurate diagnosis. So when it comes to autistic traits that others might notice, at first glance, you might not notice it, but if you get to talking to me, I think you do notice it. And I think most people do after a minute or two, because I'm very talkative. And when I'm talking to people, if it's not of the most superficial nature, which is the thing is most challenging to me, when I'm talking a little bit more than that, I'll get into a subject, whatever it happens to be, and it's a topic that interests me, which oftentimes really actually turns people off because they're not interested, and I will monopolize the conversation, and I have difficulty knowing when to let the other person speak. So that's a challenge that I still deal with to this day. I still have to be very, very cognizant of how long I've been talking, and maybe it's time to ask the other person a question, even though it's thoroughly unnatural to me. It's just something that I learned how to do, and I do practice it as a practice. I also, most of the time, appear rude in public. I know that even if I'm speaking what I consider to be polite speech, it never comes off that way. People accuse me of being rude most of the time. I do have an issue with small talk and social conventions of a superficial nature. So when I don't like it, I don't like to employ it, I get frustrated when I have to do it, I have a hard time when I do it. So that's an issue. And most of the time my voice is considered too loud. Part of that is because I was a professional singer in my limited capacity over the years, and so I'm used to projecting, but I think it also has to do with autism. I do get very upset when things are not the way that I think they should be, and that can be expressed sometimes verbally. I think what people don't notice about me is how much concerted effort I actually put into masking. And when I was younger, and before I even knew I had autism, I called it putting on my face. And I employed it when I was performing because I found, ironically, that getting in front of an audience was the most advantageous way for me to communicate with people, because I was here, they were there, I could project to them and put on this face and sing songs, and later on in my life perform my poetry, which I've written 4 books of poetry. And that worked because it wasn't reciprocal, and it was something that I could do, just me giving out, basically, which is the way I kind of interact with the world. So to me, it's kind of, I always perceived it as pretending, really. I mean, I know it was not my authentic self, not anything that comes natural to me, but I figured out how to do it very, very early on, and it worked for me. And then that's how I was able to facilitate social interaction. And then on a milder level, environmental things do bother me. And I do sometimes make mention of the fact that I don't like rooms that have a lot of loud noise, or glaring lights are very it's very uncomfortable, or being in a crowd of too many people. I don't mind it if I'm in front of the crowd, but if I'm in the crowd, it's very, very difficult. I don't like it at all. So, I think one of the reasons why people might not think I'm autistic, and I think like I said, I think on the surface that may be what people think, is because I appear to be very high functioning and I'm articulate, which is great, but I'm well educated. I have 2 college degrees. I've achieved certain societal markers in life, such as marriage and children, although my marriage failed, and but my children are highly successful, for which I'm very grateful. But those things might obscure the challenges and the limitations and the struggles that I've had my whole life. I think my autism is a strength. One way is because when I put myself to something, I get into it and I learn everything I can about it, and I get very, very, directedly focused on whatever it is. And sometimes it can be multiple topics, but if I'm in a learning mode about a topic or researching, I would have been a great researcher if I had had another lifetime. I don't like tasks being undone, and I'm good at completing projects or assignments or agendas. So that is an advantage to me. But my autism is challenging because I do find it difficult to be like everyone else. I do have to mask a great deal in order, and even just to have conversations. I don't, like I said before, the social conventions of a superficial nature have been resulted in multiple and ongoing incidences of me being called rude. It has also affected my work history throughout my life. While I did achieve certain things, like, I wrote 8 books, and I was an intermittent professional singer and voice teacher. And when I say intermittent, I truly mean that. I never had an ongoing full-time job for any length of time in my life. I wasn't able to hold a full-time job, and it would remain daunting to me to this day to even consider such a thing. So what I did manage to achieve was by the skin of my teeth, truly. So what has been helpful to me before or after being diagnosed? I think before, I was adopted, and my adopted mother used to say things to me like, Theresa, when you're talking to people, you need to stop and let the other person say something so they have a turn. And it was kind of like revelatory to me at a very young age that that's what I needed to do. And so I employed this practice without knowing why I needed to employ it, why it was an issue for me, or anything like that. But that little tidbit has been very helpful to me, even to this day. And that has gotten me through many conversations, which actually became conversations once I employed it. Since being diagnosed, I think I'm more forgiving of myself, and that goes a long way, because I'm more understanding of why my life went the way it did, which for years I did not understand. The bipolar diagnosis really didn't make any sense. But however, if they didn't even look at the idea of an autistic female, it might have made sense because of the rapidity of my speech, which could have been interpreted as manic, and the fact that I did get depressed at certain points, but I haven't been depressed for 14 years. So what is that? So anyway, I am optimistic about my future because I have better tools now with which to manage my life and my relationships. One thing that has been particularly gratifying in the last month is I finally, after 9 years of being diagnosed, have gotten to a behavioral support specialist who is absolutely A1, perfectly wonderful. And she has truly understood me and has been so helpful in helping me to we're going to approach these issues that I have and try to figure out how I can deal with them better and be a better person to be around for my children and for my grandchildren and the people that I interact with. So if you want to know more about me, my website is theresawerba.com, TheresaWerb, as in boy, a.com. I'm on social media at the Sonnet Queen, S as in Sam, ONNET as in Tom, QUEEN, because I do write sonnets. I have a whole book of sonnets. So I appreciate taking the time that you have taken to learn a little bit about me, and I appreciate it very much. And again, this is a rough copy, a proof copy, but it looks basically like this. It's called Finally Autistic: Finding My Autism Diagnosis as a Middle-Aged Female. And I would be very gratified to share my story with you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello everybody. I want to thank William for having me on his channel. I appreciate you including me. I really love this community. It really makes me feel loved. You know, in a world when it's hard to feel like people understand you, that's what YouTube autism community does for me. It makes me feel like I have a place to belong, and so I'm grateful for chances like this to tell my story, and hopefully others will connect in somehow. And I've got a list of questions here and I'm going to answer those. Welcome to my studio. This is as good as it gets for me. So my name is Jenny and I have a channel called Autistic Jenny. And I have been making videos for 2 years. I am a 51-year-old woman with a husband named Jeff, and I have 2 children, Christian and Chelsea. I have 4 grandchildren, Alexis, Connor, Jacob, and Elliot. And I have a part-time job and a part-time Etsy shop, a hobby that keeps me busy, which is making videos and making content creations, and which is what I really enjoy doing. I was diagnosed at the age of 48. It was really a shock for me. It was a happy shock. It's taken me a long time to get where I feel okay since diagnosis, from the roller coaster of emotions I have had during this time, to get to a place of understanding. So I'm going to talk about if this process was easy or hard for me as far as getting diagnosed. I feel like it was hard for me because all of these years I lived just coping the best I could, thinking that I was so different from everybody and not understanding why. And so it's been hard because of that. So what really led me to go and get a diagnosis was I was researching different things to see where my daughter fit, because I felt like after going through information about her childhood and thinking over it, and I felt like she might have been autistic. And so I went on YouTube watching YouTube videos like a lot of us do that are curious if we're autistic, and that whole process just really led me to go for my first evaluation. So I went in 2017 at the age of 43. I had a whole series of testing done only for it to come back as her diagnosing me with social anxiety disorder or an intersocial phobia with a future rule out of social communication disorder. But I really felt like that was just wrong. She had gotten some of the tests wrong as far as who answered them and put the wrong. When she was going over the assessment with me, she didn't even get it right, and she had to write it on there as we were having the assessment. She didn't add my scores in on the social responsiveness scale. Such scores are strongly associated with a clinical diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, but she didn't diagnose me with it. And she felt like I just couldn't be autistic because I had one friend, that one friend of mine. And so therefore I'm not autistic. I really think, and maybe it's not her fault, maybe it's her training, that she just didn't understand autism in women. And I just went on about life. I just moved on, just thinking, well, I guess there's nothing really that wrong with me. But I just felt like she was wrong deep down. So opportunity came about again. I decided to go for it again because things were getting so bad in my life at work, where I was having so many questioning situations arise of how I was handling things and not able to handle things. And I thought, well, I'll just try again. I went to a different place. So I went to a licensed psychologist who did the testing. She didn't reorder every single test because I'd already had all the tests done. She just redid a couple tests. So I went in there not masking. I dropped the entire mask. She noted just from talking to me that I had a lot of intonation in my speaking, which is monotone talking. And she also noted that my facial expressions appeared limited. And I really also had trouble communicating my connection with other people. And she very easily gave me that diagnosis of ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder. So I'm going to say it was hard to get diagnosed until I saw the right psychiatrist. Then it was easy. And when I dropped the mask, it was easier. So here's some advice for you if you were thinking about going and getting tested. Don't go in with a mask. So what are some of my autistic traits that other people might notice? I do stim a lot, but I think in today's world, people that deal with anxiety and stuff or have ADHD, maybe move around a lot. I just don't think it's noticeable in today's world. Although it's noticeable to me because I'm doing it, other people don't notice. And I'm noticing now when I'm more likely to stim. When I'm happy or anxious, I'm going to stim more. Others probably don't notice I have sensitivities to sound. I had a situation today where somebody was trying to tell me something at work, and we were out in the open and other people were talking and there was background mumbling going on, and I just couldn't focus on what she was saying. So I was just shaking my head yes to what she was saying, not understanding what she was saying though, because my mind can't handle getting so many different types of stimuli when I'm trying to focus on what someone's saying. Other people are not aware I do that because I'm so good at hiding that. Other people might not think I'm autistic because I'm good at masking. At least I think I am. Other people might tell me differently that I'm not. But I have a constant mask on parts of my day when I'm at work or go in public in general, as much as I can handle it, as I'm trying to learn to drop it. And a script. There's always this script that follows me around of what to say to people. So because of those reasons, I think people would not assume that I was autistic. My autism is a strength for me because I can hyper-focus on things I want to do, and I can stick to it until I get it done. That is one of the things I love about autism, is my ability to focus. And I think I've created some wonderful things in my life that I've been very proud of, like an Etsy shop where I make digital downloads. So that's something that makes me feel proud because it took hours upon hours of focusing my attention and energy to all of the things I created, to the dismay of my family, who would say I was working too hard and too much and they wanted my attention. So that's when it's a challenge for me. That's a challenge. When I am focused in something I want to do, and if someone's trying to take my attention away, I can feel agitated and upset and mad about it, and I have to try not to, knowing that that's how I respond. My autism is challenging because of my social anxiety, which is a part of it. It can be crippling for me. I've had some really bad social phobias happen to me in a couple of social events I've had over the last year that just left me just about broken to never wanting to go to another social event again. And I've really had to work on healing from that and realizing it's okay to not go if I can't handle it that day, and realizing I've got to give myself some grace, and that if family loves me, they will understand and be willing to understand that I'm not able to handle it. So how has my faith been a resource and help both before and after my diagnosis? I would say that I've always felt like I've had God in my life. I was raised in a family where I went to church, and I wanted to be a part of that. What I like about religion for me is it brings hope and peace. I think if I didn't have that, I would be so much more of a wreck or mess than I am now. I think that God calms me in the times I really need it. And if I'm ever going through a breakdown of any sort, I feel like after a few minutes of that anguish, when I pray, I feel like God comes to my rescue. Call it a guardian angel he sends, I don't know, but I can feel a calm and peace come over me, and that's something I feel like having a relationship with God brings for me that I'm so grateful for. I want to thank you for having me, William, on your channel. I've enjoyed talking about this. Thank you, everybody, so much. Maybe I'll see you on my channel sometime. Thanks for listening to this interview.
Hi everyone, Dr. Sosin here, but please call me Lisa or my nickname Lisle. I am absolutely delighted to participate in William's profile, Autistic Profile series. My current age is 61, and the next question is, how old was I when I was diagnosed? I was 60. It was last year. It wasn't even a year ago now. And what was the process like? The process of getting diagnosed was phenomenal. I found an expert who specialized in assessing women, adults, and she was so thorough and was so sure that I was autistic, and it was such a relief to finally understand who I am. She made it really easy, and she really encouraged me to cultivate a heart of acceptance toward my soul as an autistic person, as an autistic person on the human spectrum, you know. So I am so grateful for that. My autistic traits others might notice. Next question. I think, when you're my age and you've masked, I'm an intuitive person, like many autistic people, and I learned very early that my autistic traits were not celebrated by people, and one of my traits being that I am highly sensitive to criticism and rejection. I learned really quick how to squash out aspects of myself that weren't going to be accepted by people. So I think that although people who know me well, especially my husband, they know that they see my traits such as wanting to be alone a lot, intense interests in what I love. I like to be on the floor with my bunny a lot. I like to move and be out in nature, but people don't really know just how much I need and like to move. So those are some of the traits that others might notice, but easily, I think because of my vocation, they give me leeway and they don't consider that I might be autistic. Traits others probably don't notice is my executive functioning challenges. I hide those really well. They don't know how childlike I really am in my heart. They don't know that I really like being alone and engaging in my special interests. They don't know how much I love my bunny and can sit forever and pet her. They don't know how my relationship with the Lord is so intertwined with my autism, that my relationship with God is so playful and young. My experience as an autistic person is very holographic, and I experience my own soul, my own thoughts, my own relationships, including my relationship with God, on many levels at once. Usually with the Lord, I'm experiencing, something like I'm walking along the beach. This isn't just in like my sanctified imagination. I really sense myself walking along the beach. I'm like 7 years old. We're walking along and, or I'm climbing up on him and on his shoulders. I need to be really close. So, people don't know that, The next question, others might not think I'm autistic because, well, for all the stereotypical reasons. When I was first thinking about this, I had gone out to lunch, which I hate doing, by the way. I hate going out to lunch. I eat the same things every day. I want to be home. I agreed to it because they insisted, because it was my 60th. It was around my 60th birthday, which, that was so kind of them, and I love them very much. They're not my inner circle friends, which there are few of those, but we were sitting out at the restaurant, and I said to them, I think I might be autistic. And they jumped down my throat. They're like, you're not autistic. And here's the reasons they gave. And I hate to even say these out loud, because the autistic community, the community of people I have connected with, especially the autistic creators, for instance, on YouTube, precious, sensitive, loving, delightful people. Anyway, these friends said, you're not autistic because you love people. You love people? You're sensitive to people's needs. You know how to emotionally connect. And I thought, oh my, I still have not told those two friends. No judgment. It's just that people don't understand, especially what it looks like for women. People don't think I'm autistic because, here I am. I'm a professor. I'm a writer. I'm a psychologist and a therapist, and I couldn't be autistic, could I? So the next question is, my autism is a strength because I think, especially in my relationship with God, it's so intense, it's so colorful, it's so real. I love it. My autism is challenging continually. Every day, my autism is challenging. I need my routines, I need my rituals, I need a lot of time. I hate to travel, I hate to do anything different. It's very challenging. Lastly, how has my faith been a resource or a help, both before and after? My faith is everything, and getting the assessment was so helpful because my conscience would condemn me as being a bad Christian because, the things that are overwhelming for me and I avoided made me feel like I was not a good Christian, sitting in the back of the church, going out and moving around when I needed to, hiding these things at church. A lot of things at church are really hard for me. I love my church community and I love God, but it's hard for me, and sometimes I don't go because of that. But in my relationship with God, even when my conscience condemns me, I know He delights in me. I know He knit me together as I am, not as I should be. My faith is exploding. So That's it, William. I hope this is what you were looking for. Everyone in this community, thank you with all my heart. May you flourish. May you cultivate a heart of acceptance toward your soul, and may you shine just as you are. Thanks so much. Bye.
My name is Kat Coffin. I'm 34 years old, and I was diagnosed with what was then termed Asperger's syndrome, that is now modern autism spectrum, when I was 9 years old. I was very lucky. Not every young girl is as lucky, because three of my brothers were diagnosed on the autism spectrum. I went in with them to be diagnosed when they started. My two older brothers were diagnosed first, and then when we moved to Missouri from Indiana, they found like a new counselor and a new therapist, and I was just getting at that age, and so they had me tested along with them. So I was very lucky in that respect. So for me, it was easy. It's not always the case for other women. I think in the 80s and 90s, when myself and my siblings were diagnosed, it was more common, it was thought to be more commonly associated with young boys. They aren't necessarily looking for little girls, and especially since most young girls manifest autistic symptoms a little differently than little boys. So, um, my process was easy, but I want to just recognize that it was out of the norm for me and for most young girls. I would say that if I am not around people I am 100% comfortable with, I can be very quiet. I can be very sort of, I was called shy as a little kid. I had pretty intense social anxiety. So probably the quietness, just being afraid of saying the wrong thing, is probably the most noticeable. When I hit high school, I got very good at masking my autistic traits. So actually, recently there's been a kind of an ongoing process of demasking and just kind of letting my autism freak flag fly. Um, I think like it's kind of a great time for neurodivergent folks, for autistic folks, and ADHD folks, and there's a greater understanding of stimming. But privately, I would stim. I would have different kinds of. I would happy flap. That's probably the most common people think of. I would scratch denim, like denim jeans or denim jackets. I like the sound of that, and uh, that those are probably the stims that I think of right away. But also, like, this is kind of a silly stim, but like movie quotes are a big stim. And if I am like, they're a good way to calm me down is to pick a favorite movie and just start reciting it to myself. Actually, in long car rides, my siblings and I would have games where we would literally just recite a Disney movie. So that's noticeable to us, maybe not necessarily as noticeable to others. I have a lot of friends. I'm social. My autistic hyper focuses are a little bit more socially acceptable, or they look good in a college course. Like, I mean, I'm lucky. C.S. Lewis is obviously one of my hyper focuses. Like, I didn't get trains or Disney movies or dinosaurs, common sort of autistic hyper focuses, but it's not just that I'm obsessive about C.S. Lewis. It's a genuine it's a genuine autistic hyperfocus. Um, I have eidetic memory for specifically hyperfocuses. So that would just include like music, and song lyrics and guitar chords for all of my favorite singers, and for books. Like I can I love misquoting C.S. Lewis because I can usually tell if it's a misquote or not because I recognize the longer thing. So it's been a boon to me in academia because as long as I am really intensely interested in the subject, it will stay in my brain and I can refer back to it anytime I want. Well, it's great for college academia, but in high school and grade school, where you are learning things that you are not necessarily obsessed or interested in, I cannot focus on it. I have never been good at math. Um, unless I was reading about science, I didn't like participating in science experiments. When I refer back to math, because that was the bane of my existence as an autistic child, because I simply was not interested, did not care, and my grades were poor. So that was a pretty tough challenge growing up, and I really didn't start to kind of hit my perfectionist academia stride until I hit college. So definitely challenging that way. And of course, overstimulation is a very real thing, and burnout is can make life very challenging. I can exhaust myself really easily. Well, my diagnosis was pretty young, and I think it uh, took place kind of around the time I started going to like a Protestant private Christian school. So there was, at first, there was like kind of a fear, a shame almost associated with it. And I kind of didn't want to be like my brothers. So I would kind of deny it and kind of try to prove to God that no, I'm not like my brothers. I have a big circle of friends. Like I don't stim in public, so it's not real. Like things like that. I think that a greater and closer relationship with Jesus made me more accepting of myself. That's one of the beautiful things about Christianity and accepting God and accepting Jesus in your life is you learn that the person you were created to be all along was beautiful and wonderful and special. And that's truly what being a child of God is all about. So, coming to a greater acceptance of myself as an autistic woman and being a little bit more open about it, not hiding it, not keeping it like a dirty little secret, um, I attribute all of that to God. I attribute that to all of the Christians who, through their faith in Christ, allowed them to be who they truly are. And I am inspired by that. And I thank God every day that He made me this way.
Hey, my name's MJ. I was diagnosed with autism in the summer of 2023, so just last year, and it has been an interesting journey because I was aware that I was autistic for quite a while, but I went through private diagnosis in the end after years of believing I was autistic but not 100% sure and living with imposter syndrome. The process of getting diagnosed was actually fairly easy for me from the moment I had made contact with the company that I wanted to use, and the time that it took for me to actually get my diagnosis was maybe just 3 or 4 months. It wasn't a long time. There was a heck of a lot of information passed within that period, and there was a lot of research done into my background, into my family, and it was a lot of grilling, raw conversations I had to have. So it was uncomfortable, but at the same time, it was a really quick process for me. And I think that's mainly because I went private. it was much easier. It's a lot harder if you go through the NHS route. It could take years, and you could be met with lots of professionals who don't agree with you or don't believe you. People might know that I'm autistic because I can sometimes stim in public. They're very subtle stims, but still, regardless, not many people dance their fingers or flick their fingers in public. So that can be quite an obvious autistic trait if you see me doing that. Also, I'm a very literal thinker. So when I'm having conversation with people, I can take things very literally, and that can get me in a bit of a sticky situation with someone. Or I'm just laughed at because I don't understand the content of the conversation. I'm not very shy when it comes to saying that I'm sensory overloaded. If I smell something disgusting, or if the room is an absolute tip, I will voice that to people around me. So my bluntness can make it obvious that I'm autistic. I can cut a lot of labels off of my clothes because they are really itchy. So that's quite a subtle thing that other people wouldn't necessarily notice about me being autistic. Another thing is that my meltdowns generally happen behind closed doors. If I'm feeling a meltdown come upon me, I will try and prolong it as long as I can till I get home and I feel safe. So other people don't generally see that I have meltdowns. My husband, unfortunately, is the only one that has seen me have a really huge meltdown. Shutdowns in the same, like I have a lot of shutdowns, but they go unnoticed by other people because you can generally hide a shutdown a lot easier. And lastly, I have huge anxiety, but it's something that's really, really subtle, and I can hide it through subtle stimming. So people don't generally see how anxious I am, and therefore they don't assume that I'm living as a neurodivergent person. People wouldn't assume I'm autistic because I am really good at communicating. I give a lot of eye contact. I make friends really easily. Don't know how to maintain them, but I can make friends. I can hold down a job. I have a mortgage. I'm married. These are things that people don't generally associate with autism. I'm also not a boy who's obsessed with trains, really good at maths, loves to line things up. And that's usually the stereotypical view of what people think of autistic behaviours are. And also that extreme behaviours that you can get with some autistics, the display of behaviours. I don't react the same way other autistics can in public. So I am perceived to either be mildly autistic or not autistic at all. I can feel other people's emotion when I enter a room. This is a bit of a strength of my autism. I can feel what other people are feeling without it being really stated obviously to everyone in the room. And I can adapt how I interact with them based on what my brain is telling me. The challenge of being autistic for me is that I can have hyper empathy in certain moments, and I can be so overcome with my own emotion as well as other people's emotion that I'm not able to properly engage in conversation or assess my environment. It can be very overstimulating for me to feel so intensely on certain things. I grew up in a Christian household, so my faith has always been part of knowing who I am. I think the rules that Christianity have really helped me to feel grounded as a child and knowing what was right from wrong, and the high sense of justice that I've had has basically come from having a faith and knowing how to conduct myself in life. Church has always been a place of community and having people in my life who accept me and love on me, especially having a diagnosis where I feel like the world rejects me. So God's people are the people that generally accept me, and that's quite a good feeling. Since my diagnosis, my faith has been instrumental in my identity. I know exactly who I am and how my brain works, and God has always known that about me, and God has always accepted that about me. So my faith is really strong because I am the King's daughter and I have somewhere to belong. My faith has got me through some really dark times in my life, and I feel as an autistic person it is really rare that we can avoid any kind of trauma. The Bible is very clear that suffering is part of life. So knowing that my faith and my diagnosis go hand in hand just makes me feel human. And God accepts me just the way I am. So my faith helps me to accept me just the way I am.
Hi, I'm Holly. I am 41 years old and I was diagnosed August 16th of this year, 2024. Quite luckily, it was very easy for me to obtain an assessment because I live in America and the wait time is not the same as it is in Europe and other places around the world. And because aside from the interviews and testing, I submitted a lot of color-coded images of things like report cards, past notes from teachers, candid photos throughout the years of my hand gestures, as well as my sameness in clothing, and my collections and special interests. And because of that, the psychologist doing my testing said that we would need a lot less time to actually evaluate whether or not I am autistic. And we spent a lot of that time talking about my higher support needs. But I do want to say that people are often surprised that someone who is level 2 or has substantial support needs can be diagnosed later in life as an adult. Sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. For me, I was in and out of foster care when I was younger. Yeah, so after I was adopted at 9 years old, all of my traits were put on me being in foster care. So there's no need to feel ashamed if you are level 2 or have substantial support needs and you weren't diagnosed as a young child. I don't go out much, but when I do go places with my spouse, often in the checkout line at the grocery store, I'm doing a lot of this, I'm doing a lot of this, and a lot of this, and I won't notice, but everyone else seems to notice, and I've even had people come up to me before and say things like, oh, you must be used to rocking children, because I was going like this a lot, and I guess they associated it with like this. And so that was interesting. I also just don't make eye contact with people in person. It's not really a shyness thing for me. It's really a sensory issue. I'm a very visual person, and I'm taking in all of that visual input of the raising eyebrows, and so I'll need to look at something static like the floor or the wall so I can really take in what they're saying. I think the third thing is, even my psychologist who did my assessment, one of the things that stuck out the most is consistently loud. I really try to help this, but I do have a consistently very loud voice. And I'm making an observation about someone who's like the next checkout lane over. I'm not quiet about it, and then I can be seen as rude, so that's not great. As far as autistic traits that people don't notice, if you're in person, you're going to notice. But really the times when my autistic traits go the least noticed are probably on my YouTube channel. Even though I have no wanting to hide the fact that I'm autistic and that I have stems, both vocal and in movement, I do also really want the message I'm trying to convey, whether it be about creativity or identity, to be able to be easily received by the person watching the video. And when I'm going like this, and I am have a lot of vocal stems, then sometimes people can just be motion sick before I really even get a chance to convey what I want to say. This next question is the reason why I reached out to William in the comments, and he ended up sending me a really wonderful email back inviting me to do an interview, which I thought was just really great of him. Having substantial support needs, or level 2, whatever you want to call it or not call it, it means that people are always going to notice that I'm autistic. I can't mask in person the way that other people can, and people who don't know about autism may even think that I maybe have a mental illness because of the way that they see me interacting with the world, or maybe think that I have an intellectual disability if they really don't know anything about autism and they don't really have a base to compare me with. And so it can be quite difficult. And I know that people with lower support needs can understand when going through burnout, often kind of what it feels like to be more akin to level 2. But for me, not being able to drive, cook for myself, live on my own, hold down any sort of traditional job outside the home, that's my starting point, not where I am when things are really dire. And so I think it's really important to listen to people with substantial support needs. Visibility is important, and people with substantial support needs need to find each other, because I'm not getting everything that I need, because I'm not being fully seen and understood through all the aspects of being autistic for me. I love that. Really, I attribute this to being autistic, that I am such a visual person. It has enhanced my life so much, and I've been able to partake in so many creative pursuits because of it. And I'm very much a fixer. I can find some great creative out-of-the-box solutions, and I attribute that so much to my autistic brain. Faith is really a tough issue for me to talk about because it is so entangled in the church that I grew up in the Deep South, where I was treated very differently because of my autistic traits, like my very deep curiosity and need to ask a lot of questions, and just being overall very different and non-conforming. That was especially so with my peers in the youth group. And unfortunately, my school bully went to my church and was a part of the youth group with me. Sometimes when trauma happens in the very place where we hope to be able to explore our faith, especially in our formative years, faith can often be associated with that pain. And I went through a lot of deep pain going to a church with peers who were not accepting at the best of times and quite cruel at the worst of times. But I do hope, and I think I already have a bit in the autistic community, found some really safe people to explore this topic with. And I really do hope that I can be a safe person too. Thank you so much, William, for giving me and other autistic people a platform to discuss their personal experiences. And have a great day, everyone. Bye.
I'm William O'Flaherty. Thanks for visiting my channel. Please consider liking and/or sharing this video. Also, feel free to comment and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and watch other videos.